Okay, as you can see, this is I've finished page 1 and I've glued all the bits onto the 2 chassis rails, which run across here, all the way along really. When you're putting them together on this, you've got to be very careful to make sure that they go the right way around. Most of them, it's obvious which way around they go because there are little sticky out things, which are mainly airlines and torque bar connections. This one, however, this rail, very difficult to notice that on the inside there are 2 holes. You can't see that. There are 2 holes in it which should be pointing to the rear of the vehicle, and I've got them pointing to the front. It's not that big a problem. And the bit that there is a piece that glues on there, which is one of the torque bar connectors. I'll sort that out when I come to it. Cross that bridge when I get there. Underneath, all the rails on. I've also done page 2, as you can see. All the chassis members, the suspension for the airbags, the suspension carriers for the airbags, the spring hangers for the springs on the front and here, the cross members at the back, as I've just mentioned. Most of it pretty straightforward. There is, however, one bit, this bit here going across, which on the instructions says no cement. So I haven't put any cement in. That's what it tells you to do, so that's what I've done. I'm not sure why it says no cement. It's simply a radiator support, but hey ho, we'll see. One of the problems with it is though that it falls out very, very easily. So as what I've done on the instructions, I've marked it as not done, and I'm going to put that to one side so it doesn't get lost, and I'll fix it in when I come to fix the radiator in. Now then, as you may see, there's some black paint on the chassis. What I decided to do, when I was looking at it, I thought, you know, I'm not going to be able to paint any of that. Once I'll get all the stuff on it, if you look at the instructions, 3 or 4 pages along, if I can get that into there, there's less and less room to get in there with either an airbrush or a paintbrush or anything else. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided to simply paint the inside rails at the inside of the chassis rails. Now then, in my determination to cock this up, I started by painting this area first, and I got so much paint on the engine, the gearbox, the engine and the transfer box whilst I was painting the insides of the rails that I thought, well, I may as well paint those as well. So I did. I then turned it over and realised that from all the little holes which mount other parts, the paint had leaked through. It's quite obvious now that with hindsight, but hindsight's a brilliant thing. So I stopped painting it, allowed that to dry. I've not cleaned it off the edge of the rails because there's no real point. That's all going to be painted at some point anyway. However, in my determination to cock it up completely, what I decided to do was use blue tack to cover all the holes on the outside and any parts on the inside that were going to have to be glued, such as this one here. Yeah, you can just see it there, maybe not. Yeah. So I covered all those little bits with blue tack. Brilliant idea, it seemed. There are proprietary brands of stuff on the market, I believe, now that I've researched it, called masking substances which you can stick on, and they do a fantastic job of doing exactly what I intended to do. However, blue tack works perfectly. This morning I've spent 2 hours trying to get the blue tack off with a knife, a craft knife, very carefully cutting into the blue tack on all the holes, tiny little holes. You can see that one there that were full of blue tack, and it also seemed to react with the paint, and the parts of the blue tack that did went as hard as concrete. My advice would be, don't use blue tack. Other than that, there's no problems with it. And I mentioned on the last video, I don't know how well you can see that, to be honest, this prop shaft down here, that I wouldn't assemble it, I wouldn't have glued it in, and I glued the end of the universal joint into the gearbox, then fitted the universal joint on it, then fitted the universal joint onto the prop shaft, a short prop shaft, but didn't glue it into the transfer box. And when I came to put all this together, it was the right thing to do. You would not be able to get that in if you glued the end of the universal joint into the transfer box. As it stands there now, there's no glue on it. It doesn't need any, because once it's put together, it just clips in perfectly, and then when you glue the transfer box in, there's no problem with it whatsoever. One other thing that I would say, these universal joints, I hope you can see that there, on the end here, when you put them on, my advice would be, if you put that universal joint going up and down, you haven't got a cat in hell's chance of getting it to connect to whatever it connects to at the other end, in this case of differentials. So it needs to go side to side, and then you can just clip the prop shafts into it. If that makes sense, fantastic. Nothing else was of any difficulty on that, to be fair. It all clipped together extremely easily, and following the instructions on it was really quite simple. Page 2 on here, it doesn't look as though there's much on it, but it does take a while. I've marked here that this element needed to be filed, just for your information really. That you make 2 of them, but they simply don't fit together. They don't fit together flush, and both of them, so it wasn't a moulding error on one, it seems to be on both of them. If you file the little lug that fits into this area here ever so carefully, a little bit at a time, and then try it again, try and fit them together again, eventually it will come out together and fit properly. And they are these 2 little pieces here and on this side. And also, of course, because because they needed filing and they weren't fitting together properly on the as a part, they didn't fit properly on the chassis. Yeah, you can just see them underneath that cross rail. Maybe a bit better view that way. Yeah, you can just see them on there, but they won't fit properly on the chassis rail unless you file that edge off them. Everything else seemed to fit together really quite well. That's it for page 2. What I'm going to do for the next video is page 3, which is basically putting axles together. Hopefully, yeah, that's it. So put all these axles together and see how I get along with that. I shall make the video and let you know how I get on. Ta-da!